You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to an episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today, but before we do, huge shout out to our sponsors. The Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma. And it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my two pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my two golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. We are down at Bedford's Camera. I'm going to talk a little bit about some rodeoing today. It gives me great pleasure to introduce my guest, Mr. Maury Tate from Mo Betta Shirts. Excited to dive into your story. Before we do, though, I got to thank Pepper, who introduced us, referred you to being on the podcast, said you got a great story, and we'll dive into that. But before we dive into the things that you do now, where'd you grow up? Tell me a little bit about your upbringing and what it was like back then.
Well, I grew up in Apache, Oklahoma, a little town of southwest Oklahoma down by Lawton, 1,200 people from that little town. And actually, I went to a little country school called Boone School that first through 8th grade. And it's unique. There was 67 kids in the whole school, and 61 of them were Native Americans. So it was just an unbelievable school, and so that was cool. But the little town that I grew up in, it's unique. Is we have a NFL football coach from there. We have a Major League Baseball. We had an NBA referee from that little town, and a lot of rodeo guys. Yeah. So, and then there's an Indian artist named Doc Tate, Navacahoya, that has work in the White House. Wow. He's an artist. So.
Yeah. So from a small school and small town.
Yeah. There's been a lot of things happening there.
Yeah. Big family growing up?
No, I have two older sisters, and like I said, we just lived 8 miles west of Apache out there in the country, and grew up out there.
Are you close to where you grew up now?
Yes, actually, I both of my parents have passed, but I have their place and live actually just right around the corner. So.
Yeah. I grew up in the UK, and so being outside, playing golf. I always loved being outside, but we're kind of landlocked, and you come out here and there's so much land everywhere, and a lot of people generally gravitate to the city and all the neighborhoods, and they want to be close to where they work. Until you've spent a weekend or maybe a week in the country out there, silence is it's one of the best things in the world, right? People need to live more in the country, I think.
Yeah, in today's time, there's never been a better time to live in Apache, Oklahoma. It's a real slow place. You go to a convenience store, everybody knows you, and it's a great place to raise a family.
Yeah. So growing up, two older sisters, Did you think about getting into rodeo at a young age? What was kind of like the childhood dreams when you were growing up in Apache?
Well, I tell everyone, they ask me that same question, and I never thought of doing anything else but rodeoing. Okay. When I was 8 years old, I had a clown act, and trained a horse to jump through a ring of fire, and I would go to rodeos, and that was my clown act, and I rode bulls, and where it came from, I have no idea. My dad rodeoed when I was a kid, and so I don't know if that was it, but I mean, ever since I can ever remember, that's all I wanted to do.
Was it sheep at a young age too, and then?
No, they didn't have sheep then. No, okay. In fact, when I was a kid, we were getting on 2-year-old bulls that were mean and didn't have their horns tipped, meaning that their horns were sharp. And it's a rule now, you have to tip them, but then they didn't. And I mean, that's what we got on. It was a different time.
Was it bulls before bronc riding horses, rodeoing, or was it just bulls total?
No, well, when I was a kid, it was just bulls, okay. And then when I realized that, it was funny because my whole life I wanted to be a roper, and my dad would never let me rope, okay. But he would let me ride bulls when I was young, and then when I turned 13, he let me start roping, okay. And that's what I did, and he told me years later the reason he did that is he didn't care if I got burnt out and didn't want to ride bulls, but he didn't want to burn me out at a young age roping, so because once we started it, I mean, it was sorry about that.
That's all right.
It was all business, there was it was serious at my house,
So Dad grew up roping as well?
Yes.
Okay, and that was kind of his career and profession versus the bull riding?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he paved his way, and he knew that there was a career in roping that was better off, I guess, than riding bulls.
Yeah,
at that time.
Exactly. And like I said, at our house, I mean, everything was about roping. I mean, that came before everything, and it was, when we would go to the practice pen, it wasn't. I mean, it was, we wasn't down there to play, my mom didn't even come down there. It was just me and my dad and my sisters. I mean, if someone would pull up and stop, it was, we would stop roping. I mean, he wanted no distractions, and like I said, that was it. So
that's super fortunate to have those experiences with your dad and your sisters and your family, and a lot of people don't get that.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was fun. My dad was a real hard man. In fact, it's kind of a unique story, I've never told this in public, but my dad, when he was in 8th grade, his mom tried to kill him and his 2 brothers. And his dad took them to Mangum and rented them an old farmhouse, which was, 30 miles from Altus where they lived, and basically dumped them out. And my dad had an 8th grade education, but he kept playing American Legion baseball, and he got drafted to play pro baseball. Wow. And he couldn't go because he didn't have anybody to watch his brothers. And so my dad was... like I said, I mean, they had it rough growing up, and he was a very hard person, and that carried over into the practice arena, and the practice pen. And in fact, I'll tell you a funny story is we had after I'd gotten out of high school and even college, I had an old junky trailer house set up there. And I had 2 roommates. One of them was Robert Nunn, who is from Apache. We grew up together, been my best friend ever since I can ever remember. he coached. He played football at Oklahoma State, and then he coached in the NFL for 18 years. Won a Super Bowl with the Giants.
Wow. Yeah.
He was one of my roommates, and the other one was Doug Meacham, who is the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma State. And that summer, they would come. They'd get off work. Robert worked for his dad, and Doug worked at the co-op. They'd sit out in the front yard and listen to my dad, yelling at me and cussing me, during the practice pen. And I'd look up there, and they were sitting up there drinking a beer and living the good life. And, it's, so that was pretty comical.
Yeah. When do you start? Do you hit the road with your dad when he's doing it? Do you get to see him compete before you start competing?
No, I never got to see my dad compete.
Okay.
He had quit. Before I was born. So
okay. You mentioned your dad has a younger brother. So were your uncles around? Were they ropers as well?
No, they were not.
Okay.
I think my one uncle Alan, he did some, but my other uncle, no, I don't know that he could even ride a horse. So
Dad clearly the driving force behind you going into roping. And when does it start becoming kind of, when your dad is that intense and he's teaching you and it's this is going to be, there's no messing around, there's no distractions, we're going to learn how to do this. When you're a young man, it can kind of seem like, I don't want to be out here, right? I don't want to do this. You kind of, as a young man, you're growing up, your body's changing. When does it become, I don't want to do this, to this is, I want to do this for the rest of my life, and I totally get it now, and I can't wait to hit the road and make a career out of this?
Yeah, I never, from the day I started, that was what I was going to do.
Even through the tough days, your dad's yelling at you?
Oh, yeah. Even, through those days, it was, the more my dad would yell at me and stuff, the more motivated I would get, and so I never had ever once thought about quitting or not wanting to do it or do something else. Yeah. It was, that was just never, that thought never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
And, we roped, we would rope probably 300 days out of the year, and it was, my dad never once made me go do it. He'd give me the opportunity and it was up to me, but there wasn't a day come home that, that my dad would come home. He had a real estate business then, and when he'd come home, I would have the calves pinned and the horses saddled, and, we were ready, and, unless, weather kept us from it. But
did your sisters compete too?
No.
No? So they were just out there just because they wanted to have fun?
They did not.
Yeah. So you're going through high school, this is all happening, you're clear set that you want to have a career in roping. I assume you don't go to college.
No, I went to.
Oh, you do?
I went to college on a rodeo scholarship for 3 years.
Where at?
I went 2 years to Western Oklahoma State College in Altus.
Okay.
And then I went to a year at Southwest in Weatherford.
Are you competing in events while you're in college then? As far as there are college events, but you're also competing in other events too?
Yes. No, there was, in the rodeo world, you compete every weekend somewhere. There's always somewhere to go, whether it be a roping or a rodeo or something. So, yes, every weekend we were going somewhere, but then, we were committed that, we had to go, I think they have 10 college rodeos a year, and you have to go to those 10. So,
do you still keep up with some of your old teammates?
Oh, yeah. It, the rodeo world is, those people are your friends for life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see them every weekend.
Well, you see them, it's really not like a football. It's really not a team. Rodeo is still an individual sport. Mm-hmm. And, I was friends with guys at other colleges and other events and everything else, but, it's a small circle, and you're friends with those guys, from now on. Yeah. And they're like the rest, they start going to pro rodeos too when you start going, and you see them there, and, there's just a bond that you have.
Yeah. When you're in school, what were you drawn to as far as an academic side? obviously you're an athlete, you're rodeoing and roping.
Not very much.
Not much.
Yeah, I was.
Nothing stood out to you.
No one ever accused me of. I never made the honor roll, and it was. I was looking at it. And I was trying to take the classes that I could not have to do much and still pass, and because at that time, I wished I would have taken it more serious and studied more and all that but like I said, at the time, none of that mattered to me. It was just, rodeoing and getting good enough to go and try to make it.
So the next logical step then is turning professional?
Yes.
You become a pro and then you could start making money at it?
Yes.
Okay, what was that first event you turned pro at?
I filled my... You had to get a permit, and I filled my card at Holly, Colorado.
Okay.
And I went up there, and it was September, and shoot, it was beautiful. I left home, and I got up there, and it was snowing and freezing cold, and I didn't have a coat, and that was one of the last rodeos I could go to, and I needed to win something, and so I'll never forget that, and then. But yes, I got my card then and turned professional and just went from there.
And so then the rodeo career is pretty much every weekend you're driving, you're staying with all your buddies, or you're staying in the truck and the trailer. I mean, just you just consume that life. Then consumes you as if like you're chasing your dream.
Yeah, no, then everyone had campers on their trucks, and not all of them had showers. Some of them just had little shelves, but. Yeah, you just went and stayed in your truck, and if you were gone for a long period of time, some places had showers, some didn't, and you could find a friend's house or something like that. Yeah. But it's the greatest lifestyle there is. I mean, just think you get in a truck with two of your buddies. You're in your early 20s, and every town you go to, it is that town's function of the year. It is that whole town. It's their party, and everyone is out, and I mean, it's just you get to go and see so much country and see so many things and go so many different places that most people would never get to go to.
Yeah, a lot of small town rodeos, right? But then also you have the bigger ones, and obviously Wyoming being one of the largest. And I keep seeing advertising. There's one in Guyman coming up pretty soon. At the end of this year, right? Like that's one of the biggest ones in the state. And then I was at McCoy Cord did one at the state fairgrounds. I saw that one was kind of a big deal. And then the last one in the big house, and it's incredible fun to go to. Right, it's always exhilarating. There's always things happening. There's a bunch of different events, and I totally understand why it's some towns' biggest event of the year, because it brings in so many people, and it's a lot of fun to go to.
Yeah, and the one of the first places I got to go to was the Cow Palace in San Francisco.
Okay,
and you take a kid from Apache, Oklahoma, and I flew out there and went to San Francisco, I mean, that was an eye opener, and then you get to go to Salinas and Oakdale, California, and all them, and Reno, Nevada. I mean, that was an eye opener, and Las Vegas, and so. Yeah, and then you're there with your best friends, I mean, life doesn't get any better.
How long does that last? How long do you do professional rodeoing and roping for?
Well, I think I got my card in '86, and then 2000 was probably the last year I went, or 2001, something like that.
15-year career. Yeah. Seen the entire country.
Yeah. There's the only places I haven't ever been is back east some. I mean, in fact, this year for vacation in February, which is I would not recommend, but we went to Maine and Rhode Island, and I don't think that's really the best time to go there.
Food's still good,
but that's the only. But everywhere west, I've been to every state, and just got to see a lot of things and meet a lot of great people.
Yeah. So roping was the main focus for you. What is your relating it for me to golf? Like, I have a pre-shot routine. Generally, I go through before I hit the golf ball and all these things to get my mind in the right place. Do you have a special process for roping? Was there anything you did before every single rodeo? Any superstitions that you did when you were competing?
Well, I think everyone has, everyone has their own routine of things, call it superstition or whatever, but yes, everyone, like you try to get there the same time before every time, and you'd go pay your entry fee, saddle your horse, you try to keep everything the same, and like me personally, some people are different. Some people, they just sit and clown around and never think about it. I would always try to get off by myself and ride, and try to run it through, in my mind several times, beforehand. But no, that'd be about it.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite and least favorite place you'd go to every year?
A favorite
and a least favorite place venue you'd go to every year?
Yes. When I was going, and maybe just because when I was a kid, we'd come to the state fair and I'd get to go watch the rodeo. Mm-hmm. I loved competing in that building, and was lucky in the fact that they had several different events throughout my career there that, we got to rope there a lot. So I love that building, and just, like I said, I remember when I was a kid getting to sit up there and see the people, rope and stuff in that building, and the history that it had. So that place was always special. I love Salinas, California. That rodeo was one of the greatest rodeos, and it was awesome. One of my least favorites, and not because, it's a great rodeo now, but Dodge City, Kansas. I don't know why. I just never got along there very good at all. And like I said, nothing against the rodeo. They've done a great job, and it's one of the major rodeos now. But and that was probably part of it, is you go there with knowing you've never had any luck and stuff, and you have no luck, and you go somewhere where you've had a lot of luck and you seem to have luck. It's funny how that works.
Yeah, it is, right? That's the same for me. Like, I've got golf courses I love and golf courses I just don't want to go to because it gets you in that mindset. As soon as you step on property, you're either in a great space or not. But it definitely,
what's that old saying? If you think something good will happen, or if you think something bad will happen, you'll usually always be right. And that's rodeo's the same.
Yeah. When does it get to a point in those 15 years that you have your best year, and is there some big wins in there for you, or some personal successes, or even little wins that for you were bigger than what they look like?
Yeah, no, I think in 1987 I won Reno, which was one of the 4 major rodeos then, and that was big for me. And I've had several good wins, throughout the thing. The thing that kind of was the greatest thing and that happened to me in my life was probably also the biggest downfall or thing that hurt me the worst in the rodeo world is when I started my shirt company.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I started that in 1987.
Yeah.
So it was right out. I was 21 years old, and I started it, and shoot, at one time, I had 150 something women working for me. Had a factory and had a store in Fort Worth, and my store in Apache, and we were selling shirts all over the world by then, and it took off and it grew, but then that also took away from the prime years of of my rodeo career.
Yeah. Your focus is on this business and building this business, whereas your love for rodeoing is just kind of, even though it's still there, the focus is secondary.
Yeah, and it,
Especially in your 20s.
Someone told me once, they said, man, I'd give anything if I had something at home to where I didn't have to worry about winning. And I told them it's really the complete opposite. Yeah. When you have to win and that's all you have to worry about, it's easier to win. Like when I was rodeoing, there wasn't cell phones. You'd have to stop at a payphone. So every time we'd get gas, I'd have to stop at a payphone and call the store, check in, get who I had to call. I'd try to get them called before, and then we'd get in the truck and go. And then the next place we'd stop, I'd have to get, or if you call someone, and then there wasn't even call waiting. Yeah. So if you really had talked to someone, you're liable to, I'm liable to have to pull over every 10 miles and try them again, trying to get a hold of them, right. And the hardest thing for me then is everybody that you're competing against, that's all they've been thinking about all day. And that's the least amount of things that I was thinking about all day. You had so many other things. And
your peace and quiet time was getting on a horse.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? The opposite.
Yeah.
People are like getting there and really focusing. You are happy to have you not worry about people calling you, and you can go compete. And have peace and quiet.
Yeah, exactly. And and it's like I tell everybody, one of the guys that I rodeoed with, and probably if there's one person that I credit everything I have to, is a guy here in Oklahoma City. His name is Terrell Phillips.
Okay.
And he's a doctor. He's an anesthesiologist. And I met him, it would have been in 86, and that guy has been so good to me. There's just, I could never repay him for everything he's done for me. But I had more respect for him than anybody that I'd ever roped with or against, because he lives in Edmond. And when I first met him, he lived in Oklahoma City, and he would get off work every day and drive to Apache and rope. And I'd have his horse saddled for him, and he would rope, and then we would flank and tie until he puked. And it didn't matter how hot it was or how cold it was, that's the dedication that he had to it. And, we would go to rodeos and drive home, and we'd get home at 3 a.m, and he'd have to be at work at 5.
Oh, wow.
And here's a guy that, people's, he put people to sleep. Their life is in his hands, and it's
a pretty important job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he would, but he would be in that operating room where it was, I don't know what it is. I know it's cold in there, 50 degrees or something all day long. Yeah. And he would leave there and come to his barn where it was 110 and flank and tie until he was just, he would puke.
Wow.
And that's how hard he worked at it, and also, of all the people he's the biggest prankster and jokester that there was. Yeah. So he was so much fun to go with, and just the best guy in the world too.
Yeah, that's special. So 87, which, like I said, you kind of started in 85, 86, and so the clothing thing is already on the brain, I would assume, at this point. When you talk about a couple of years later, was the clothing thing on the brain before when you're in college, or does it come about? Like, how does that start, and also where does the name come from?
No, it's just sheer accident.
Really?
Yeah, I had a friend of mine's mom was a seamstress. Yeah. And I went and it started off, my mom had a beauty shop. Okay. And like I said, I had some Indian artists that, I went to school with and knew, and I got them to paint me some rope cans, the can that you put your ropes in. And I started selling them, and I put some of them in there, and then I went and got some some shirts, some sweatshirts, and some ladies decorated them, and I got jackets, and the artist painted them, and that's what I started out with, and then I went and bought me some fabric, and a friend of mine's mom was a seamstress, and she started making me some shirts, and we started. There were times that I'd go into a restaurant, and because they were so different, I would sell my shirt in the restaurant. And in fact, there's a guy, his rookie year, me and a guy named Fred Whitfield. I don't know if you know who Fred is. But we were in Woodlake, California, and we sold every shirt we had with us in the camper. And had to call home and get more made, and it just grew from there. And
what was so different about them? And before you get to build making fabric and the shirts, were you just selling the artists and the jackets that you have just to make extra money on the side?
I was just
me and just
I just put a set of shirts in my mom's beauty shop and was selling stuff out of there, and then when we started making the shirts, that's when it went to a whole different level. And it's because they were so much different.
What makes them so much different than what they were
the fabric,
at the time?
They were wild. At the time, everybody had the same shirts on. Wrangler probably had 4-6 styles of shirts each line, and everybody had them, and they were all the same, and they were pretty mild, and ours were bright and wild. And then we started changing them and put a stand-up collar on them, and then they had the 2 pointed flaps and a flap on the back, and they were definitely different. And just from there, it just took off and just grew like crazy. And in fact, one year at the NFR, every one of the top 15 calf ropers were wearing our shirts and stuff there. Wow. And at the NFR that year is when Wrangler started signing up and endorsing cowboys and putting their logo on them and things like that. So that's really when it took off. So.
Because in today's world, like Western fashion is kind of coming back around, right? It's kind of having a resurgence. You think people accredit it to Yellowstone or the PBR or whatever it is that people watch on TV, but it is coming back in a big way. What was the state of like the kind of Western wear and fashion industry in late 80s? Was it a thing, or was it only utilitarian for the guys who wear it?
No, it was. It was nothing like it is today. Then it was, but the difference then versus today is every little town had a Western store. Every town had a family-owned Western store. That has went away. Now I think, what does they say? There's 4 chains that do like 85% of the business. So that part of it has changed. And but then I'd say more people probably dress Western than they do today. Everybody had a pair of boots and Wranglers, and and today there's kids in my hometown that's never had a pair of boots. And that never happened when I was a kid.
They probably didn't work as hard. They didn't work hard. They don't work hard now compared to what they did back then too, right? So these shirts are selling off. People are buying them, literally buying them off your backs as you're traveling around, and you're getting more shirts, and they keep selling out and selling out. Was the lady's name who's the seamstress Mo Betta? Is that where the name comes from?
No, the name came when I was in college at Western Oklahoma State, and a friend of mine. Everything was Mo Betta sauce and all that. Okay. And that's where it came from.
All right. Yeah. So it's kicking off. You're trying to focus on roping, but the business is growing. You're selling out. How does it go from you just having, some things in your mom's beauty shop and a few shirts in the truck to, we're actually in events and selling? And tell me about the progression of the business.
Well, it just kept growing to where we couldn't keep up with, and so we started out, like I said, ladies would come in and we would cut the fabric and send them home with the fabric, and they all had a label that had their name on it, and so when it was made and hand sewn, their name was in that shirt, and then we built a factory, and we had a factory going, and we had I think there was like 30 women up there in that factory working, and
where was the factory?
There in Apache.
Okay.
There in Apache, and so it just took off from there, and we just kept doing whatever to try to keep up with it.
That's amazing.
And then we did we started out with we did a license agreement with a company called Panhandle Slim. Okay. And they would mass produce a line of shirts, and we put a black label instead of the white label, and they sold. And then we had a coat line with Walls Coat Company, and then later a company called Sidron, and had a cologne line, and had our own cologne, and so it was that was pretty fun.
And you look back, on yourself as a 12, 13-year-old thinking, how do we get here? How do I have a clothing company when I'm trying to be a professional roper traveling around the country?
Yeah, that's the thing. I've never tried to look back, and just, shoot. I enjoyed every minute of it, every day of my life. I've got to do what I love to do and want to do, and so happy to get to do it. Never once have I ever had to get up and go to work. And, that is, I'm very, very thankful for that, and that's what I tell my girls all the time, is the key to success is finding what you love to do and figure out a way to make a living doing it.
Yeah.
What you make really doesn't matter. It's if you never have to go to work every day, that's what's that worth?
Yeah.
And you come home and good mood, and
there's a lot to be said about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Does the company do you ever get offers for the company? Does someone try and buy it? Do you eventually sell? How does the company progress?
Well, we reached an agreement with a major company there, and they didn't buy it, but we agreed to not mass produce for like 10 years.
Okay.
So we quit we shut the factory down, and the biggest thing that happened is when they opened it up and started getting everything made overseas, we could have still competed with that. The thing that hurt us is all the fabric manufacturers went away. All the fabric manufacturers, was in North Carolina pretty much, where all the fabric mills were. Mm-hmm. And we used to have 10, I bet there was 10 salesmen a week would come through, and we'd buy fabric from, and you could see all this fabric. All that went away. Yeah. And then it changed to where we were designing shirts, and today you're designing fabric.
Okay.
And now you have to go to these mills and you design the fabric, and that's not what we did. Our thing was we bought a lot of different fabrics. You come in our store, you would not see two shirts exactly the same. They were all different, and so that made it hard for us, and that was really what probably hurt us more than anything.
Do you think if you started the company today, it would take off with the handmade, American-made?
If we, yes, I do. In fact, we still have a couple ladies that still make a few for us, and in fact, there's a new country artist. His name is Zach Top.
Okay, yeah, I know Zach Top. Yeah,
and
great singer.
He was wearing some and talking about him on a podcast, and so we sent him some shirts, to wear.
Amazing.
And so that was been kind of cool.
Is that the first time the business has crossed over into the music world, or was that something that's since roping and Western fashion?
Oh no,
we've the music world interweave into what you guys are clothing you're doing as well.
No, since 1991. we've made all of Garth Brooks' shirts.
Oh yeah.
So all the shirts that Garth wear, were Mo Betta shirts, and then we also made shirts for Joe Diffie. We've made shirts for before he was with Wrangler. We made some shirts for George Strait and some Tracy Lawrence and Tim McGraw and So we've
really cool.
we were able to make shirts for several different people like that. And
when you were growing up listening to music on the road all the time, have you got to meet some of your idols that you listen to then and put shirts on their backs yet?
Oh yeah, no, I've met them. Met them all. Yeah. So, like Garth. I mean, I consider him almost family. He is the most awesome person you'll ever meet in your life. And in fact, someone asked me one time, they said, man, you were so lucky to get Garth Brooks to wearing your shirts. And I told them, and I believe this, I said, yeah, that's probably true, but where we were so lucky is the fact that Garth Brooks was the person that he was. Mm-hmm. Because he was just starting to take off when he started wearing our stuff. And he had people offering him deal after deal after deal, and he never took it. Most people would have signed up with them and went for bigger, and he did not do that. Yeah. And that guy has been so good to us, and I mean, that's where we were lucky, is the fact that he was the person that he was.
That's special. Yeah, to have, and the rodeo and the music, it all integrates, right? And so it makes sense that you would have a crossover. But I mean, it's amazing when you get those phone calls or you get those days where you're like, oh, this megastar or this star at the time who knows if he's going to be a megastar, but he turns into be a megastar, and he's as nice and as good a human as it ends up being. He's been wearing your shirts.
Yeah, no, and I mean, every time you would see him with one of them on, you get, you felt good, and even when you look back and at all the pictures from then, I mean, it was a good feeling to know that someone like that would wear them and stuff. So
that's really special. So you mentioned before we started recording, you're still in the rodeo business, but you're more in the event side and putting on rodeos now. How does that interweave into everything, and how does that start? Did you have your eye on events back in the day, or is that something that just naturally evolved into?
No, I didn't. Like I said, when we reached that agreement with that company, and we weren't really in the clothing business anymore, I really didn't have anything to do, and a friend of my dad's actually, was telling me about the Cody Night Rodeo in Cody, Wyoming, and I went up there and met with them once when I was at Cheyenne, and they didn't make a change, and I really kind of give up on it. And they called me and said that they were going to look at bringing in a new stock contractor. And so we went up there and met with them, and we got the contract. Yeah. And at the time, if they'd have said, Maury, bring all your animals and do us a rodeo, I had 2 bulls big enough to buck. I had nothing. Right. And my wife grew up in Norman, and we've been married for 27 years now, and dated for 7 years before that, and been a huge part of our success and stuff. And she had never been to Cody, and we got the contract, and we go up there, and then of course we go up there in the fall, and it is freezing cold and snowing and raining, and she's like, what the hell did you get us into, and she was worried that she could do it or not, because she had never done that. And I'm like, look, there's nothing that can go wrong that we can't fix. We can do this. And so we went and we changed a lot of the way it was structured and the way it was ran, and since we have taken over, we've grown our attendance from 60,000 people a year to right around 100,000 people a year. And, we have schools, and there's been so many world champions and people get their start that go through the Cody Night Rodeo. Last year at the NFR, we had, 3 bareback riders and 2 bronc riders that, got their start with us there at Cody. So
that's cool.
Yeah, and that's been, like I said, it's just every day I get to go and do what I love to do.
Yeah. How'd you meet your wife?
I met her at Oklahoma City here. At I think at the time it was in Cahoots. I don't know if you remember that. That was a country bar. That was way before your bar, or your time. Yeah, but no, I just met her there, and then actually I met her for the second time at the Oklahoma City at the rodeo there. So she was there with her grandma watching it that night, and so
So she's comfortable and then grew up around the rodeo world as well?
Oh, no. She grew up in Norman, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, I guess they rode horses, but her and her sister went with us one time to Ponca City to the rodeo. And so me and Doc, her sister was with us, and we saddled our horses, and we go pay our entry fees, and we let them ride our horses, and we come back and they're racing. Her and her sister through all the cars and everything in a dead run, just racing. We're like, maybe that wasn't a very good idea, they just wanted to go fast. So, but and then my daughters, they both rodeoed when they were young. My older daughter, she's married now and has 2 kids. And they live in Dallas or in Frisco, right there on the edge of Dallas. And my youngest daughter, she is on a rodeo scholarship at Southwestern and made the college finals last year, and she graduates this year with her master's. So,
awesome. So very still involved in the family then.
It's always rodeo will always be a part of my family. The sport of rodeo has been very, very good to us.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of being up in Cheyenne and people who know the rodeo world, and obviously being from Oklahoma, people will know the Lane Frost brand and the Lane Frost name. Do you ever come across Lane in your travels?
Yes. In fact, when I was in college, my college roommate was a guy named Stormy Reinhardt, who was from Lane, Oklahoma. And Lane's the one that taught him to ride bulls. So I got to know Lane through him. Yeah. And so when I was rodeoing, I'd see Lane at the rodeos and visit with him. And in fact, the night before he was killed, I saw him there at Cheyenne and got to visit with him. And I'll never forget it. We left Cheyenne early that morning and went to a little rodeo in Colorado, and we left there and was headed to Hill City, Kansas, and I was asleep, and my buddy Doc woke me up and told me that it came on Paul Harvey that Lane Frost was killed. And he was you think about his brand is still so well known. Yeah. And that just tells you what kind of person you are to leave that kind of impact. That's been 30 years ago or so, and Lane Frost is still one of the most recognizable names in rodeo. Mm-hmm. And that's just, but that was the person that he was, he was, he's a lot like Garth in that way. He just was so personable to everyone and made everyone, even if they didn't know him, they felt like they knew him. And, I was kind of off the subject, but I was with Garth. I don't know if you ever heard the story about when he signed autographs for, I think it was 27 hours straight.
Wow.
At Nashville at Fanfare in June.
Wow.
And it is hot. And of course, you know, he's got on his long sleeve, his Mo Betta shirt. And I don't know the whole story, but they were supposed to shut it off, and they didn't. And he said that, you know what, he said, as long as people, you know, I'm going to stand there.
Yeah.
So for 27 hours, he stood there and signed autographs. Never went to the restroom, never drank nothing. I mean, stood up there, and I mean, it's hot.
Yeah.
And I was watching, and the thing I noticed, every person that came through there, he would find a way to connect to that person. Not I mean, he wanted to know where they were from, and he would find a way to connect with that person. And that is why I think he has made it so big. I mean, he's an unbelievable singer and all that, you know, but I mean, the person that he is and the way that he cared about people, I mean, you know, and he had some way to relate to every person that came through there, and that's the way Lane Frost was.
Yeah. It's a skill that is, you know, rare, right? It's rare in humans, and when you meet these special people, you know, like you said, they make you feel like you've known them for a long time, and they find that common ground, and you know, it goes such a long way when you're a fan and you meet your hero and they're asking about where you're from and who's your family, and you know, then they, like I said, they find common ground. It's not just, hey, sign this, and you know, in today's world, it's, oh, I want to take a picture just to prove I met you, and then they're gone, right? But you know, there's so many people who do it well. There's so many people, but there's not that many people that do it well, and you've got to experience both of those.
Yeah, and they like people. You know, they like people, and I truly believe that they all care about people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when Garth Brooks asks you where you're from or something like that, I mean, he's asking because he really cares. You know, he really wants to know.
Yeah. Being around these, you know, these successful people and seeing them, you know, up close and being, you know, some of the best of their individual crafts and professions, what are the takeaways? What are the things that you learned, you know, that you were able to implement into your own business and implement into being a dad and your family too?
Well, I think the one thing I learned is none of them are lazy. You know, I mean, you'll never find anybody that works any harder than Garth Brooks. I mean, that guy works. I mean, and tough. I mean, you wouldn't typically think of a singer or entertainer as being tough, but I'm telling you, that guy is physically and mentally tough.
Yeah.
And you know, my partner in my bulls is a guy I met his rookie year, and he played 18 years in NFL, missed one game as a defensive tackle. And I mean, it's just tough and works so hard at it, you know, and you know, it's like my buddy Doug Meacham or Robert Nunn. I mean, just the work ethic that they have and the toughness that they have, you know, I mean, and they all have that, you know, I mean.
Yeah. What's the current state of the rodeo world today?
Man, the rodeo world, I think, is growing. It's great. I think, you know, it's rodeo is, you know, they say a prayer before the rodeo. You know, they love God and they love America. They love our country and they're proud of it. And you know, I think that's part of it. I think I do believe that Yellowstone has brought a whole different group of people, you know, to our industry, and I think that's part of it. I think country music is part of it. I think, I mean, there's a lot of factors for it, but at the end of the day, I mean, I think it's one of the greatest sports there is. You know, I mean, you got, and I shouldn't say this because I'm not sure about all the sports, but you know, as contestants, you go and you pay. You bet on yourself that you're going to win, you know, and you pay to do it. And that's one of the few professional sports that is that way, you know, and that's the passion that people have about it, you know. So
you're, like I said, you're putting your own money out there and you're traveling on your own dime, and there's, you know, there's endorsements and all the things, but you know, it's as professions go, it's, you know, it's one of the toughest professions out there, other than boxing and UFC, right? Like, it's, you know, but we love that prize fighter mentality and that gladiator feeling when you're sat there and you're watching these guys, whether it's, you know, rodeo or roping or jumping on bulls or bronc riding. Like, anything can go wrong. You know, you're not dealing. They're athletes, but then you've got this wild, crazy animal between your legs that's pissed off and wants to get you off as fast as possible, right? Or, you know, a calf that's trying to get away and you've got to rope it as fast as possible.
Yeah, no, it's. You know, I tell people all the time, it's a dangerous game. You know, I mean, last week there was a, you know, kill there in Texas. You know, and I mean, it happens. You know, it doesn't happen a lot that people die, but I mean, every rodeo you go to, there's someone getting hurt. You know, and it's exciting and. And, you know, I tell everybody, the people in rodeo, to be good at it, and I'm sure it's this way in golf, too, you have to have some toughness, you have to have some dedication, you have to have some discipline, and you have to have work ethic. And usually people that have those four qualities are pretty good people.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the way it is in rodeo. And if you don't have those four, then you're not going to make it very far.
Yeah. What do you have coming up? Well, obviously, it's you know, we're recording kind of in April. What do you have coming up this summer? Anything you're looking forward to?
No, like I said, we go to Cody, Wyoming. There we start June 1st, and we go every night for 92 nights, and it's a full-fledged rodeo, and we will have, out of those 92 nights, we'll have slack 70 of them.
Okay.
Which means we have more contestants enter than what we can do in the rodeo. So after the rodeo, we have the slack.
Yeah.
And we get through there and we come home, and we get home about the middle of September, and then we go to Texas we have two rodeos at Belleville and Rosenberg, Texas, and then we do the circuit finals, and then we're pretty well rodeoed out, you know, from then. So.
Okay, so you're getting ready to head to Cody here shortly, and
yes, we'll leave around the middle of May 20th, something like that.
Not a bad time to leave Oklahoma, though.
And you get up there, and then we'll have it'll be snowing, and you know it snowed us out one year, June 8th. There, it was snowing straight down. So
So ready to hit the road soon. Wife going up with you again? Did you make the trip together?
She'll go up with me. Actually, she goes up before I do. Okay. But we have two granddaughters now, so she won't stay as long. You can't believe how. You know, now there's not a doctor in Oklahoma. Right. There's not. You can't get your hair cut in Oklahoma. You got to go to Texas to do all that now. You know, I mean, and my daughter just lives right in the middle of all of it. You know, so
she just happens to have to go down there.
Yeah, exactly. She just looks for any excuse to go and see her granddaughters and all that, and so. Yeah, which I'm glad she gets to do it, and you know the granddaughters are awesome.
Do you have a favorite? I'm not going to say either a favorite bull or a favorite horse that you've had over your career that just stands out to you.
Well, yes. There's a horse that I bought at Cody, Wyoming. They had a bucking horse sale there, and he was a 2-year-old, and I bought him, and he was a stud, in which I cut him, and I bought him the year that my dad was killed in a car wreck, and I named him Virgil after my dad, and Virgil has been Bucking Horse of the Year 2 years. They've won Houston on him, probably the greatest bucking horse to ever live. And the horse is 18 or 19 years old now, and they won around at the NFR last year, and he was bucking horse of the National Finals Rodeo. And I sold him at Houston one year. They won Houston on him. It was 93 points, and I sold Virgil for $105,000 at the time, and that was a record. And I, in hindsight, I should have kept him, but who knows?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, he's like I said, he's Western Horseman called me the other day. They're doing a story on him, and probably the most. He's not the rankest horse to ever live. I know that, but he might be the greatest. And
that's special.
So yeah, he was one. And then I had a bull that I raised that I called Red River that was runner up to Bull of the Year one year. Okay. And so those two are the ones
that's special. All right. Last question, finishing up. My day job's real estate, so I always like to close with this one. If you were to build your dream home today, what does it look like?
It's definitely not going to be on a creek. Right now, my house, I built it in the early 90s, and it's a beautiful location. It says there's creeks all around it, but with that comes bugs and snakes and skunks and coons and everything else. So whatever I build it will probably not be on a creek. Okay. Every time you have an ice storm, you're cutting up tree limbs and all that. So I may have one shade tree out there, but no, I mean, I'm pretty modest. The biggest thing is to have a fireplace and a good chair and a big screen TV. I'll let my wife do all that. So
room for the grandkids.
In fact, it'll have a playroom in it for sure. Now my wife, she sent us a picture the other day of her dream house that she wants, and so I don't know that we'll ever move. Our home is our home, and we've raised our kids in it, and a lot of memories. And
that's awesome. I'm gonna finish with this one because I love this question. If you were to write a letter to rodeo, what would you say?
There's a song out there that's about as true about rodeo, but I mean, it's just. Rodeo is, it'd be a love song, you just love it. I mean, you love everything about it. Even, you look back, even the hard times, you love it, and I tell everybody it's the most addictive thing there is, people can't quit it, and it, I don't know. But like I said, it just be, thanks for everything, all the good times, all the fun stories, and all the memories, and, all the heartaches, and, all that would be what it would be.
Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming up from Apache. Thanks for sharing great stories. Thanks to Papa for connecting us. And safe travels up to Cody, and wish you a great rest of the year, a great season. And I'm sure your wife will leave you at some point to go see the grandkids, but I'm sure she'll safe travels to come back to you, and you'll finish out the season up in September, and then back to Texas, hit the events there. But
we're lucky that they get to travel and they get to come up there and see us and stay. And my wife is in a company with my daughter now, and so they get to work together, and so it's all good.
All right, and your daughter's great. Your other daughter's graduating soon with her master's?
Yes.
Okay. It's going to be great. Have her graduated and in the Western world and enjoying life, carrying on the name. So I appreciate you coming in. It's been amazing to share your story, and I look forward to hearing many stories as things go on. And I need to make my way up to Cody. I want to come and see it and check that out. It sounds like
you need to come check it out. It's beautiful
I'd
up
love
there.
To do that. So people listening, thanks for checking us out, and we'll catch you next episode. Cheers. Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend. Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.